Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Marsh. I'm with the National Community Action Partnership. Today we're going to talk about the 2020 census and why it's important for you and your community. We're going to go through what the census is, why it's important, how you can participate, and I'm going to go over some safety information to talk about why it's safe for you to complete. It is really crucial that all people living in the United States are counted. The census is a process that is the building block of democracy in our country. It is also safe, easy, and very important. I hope that when we're done with this webinar today, you go online to my2020census.gov and do your part and fill out the census for your household. Let's talk a little bit about what the census is. It is part of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. So it's really early in the Constitution. The process was developed by our founding fathers to make sure that as our country grew and we gained population and we gained states in this brand new world, that we would have a way to reallocate federal dollars and political representation throughout the country. The Constitution mandates that we count every person who lives in the United States every 10 years. That is regardless of citizenship status. We count babies, we count people who are older, we count everybody in between, whether they're foreign-born, American citizens, naturalized. If you live in the United States on April 1st, 2020, we count you. The census asks 10 questions. These are all the questions that are on that form. They want to know how old you are and what your date of birth is, and then they want to know that information for everyone else who lives in your household. They will ask if you have a Hispanic origin or if anyone in your household has a Hispanic origin. They will ask what your race is. This year, they're adding a couple of different options to the race question. They're asking what your race is. Are you Black, white, Hispanic, Asian? And then they want to know your country of origin. The question's been tricking people up a little bit. What they want to know is where your ancestors came from. You could be from Germany or England or Senegal or Korea. That's what they're looking for that question. They're also going to ask gender. Are you male or female? They're going to ask if the house, apartment, or mobile home that you lived in is owned or rented. And then they're going to ask a few operational questions. These are simply designed to make sure that everyone in your household who should be counted has been included. How many people lived here on April 1st? Were additional people staying here? That's to catch folks who might be couch surfing, your friend down on their luck, staying with you for a few weeks, has nowhere else to call home. That person should be included in your census, even if technically you wouldn't necessarily consider them living with you. They have nowhere else to call home, and so they should be counted. Finally, the Census Bureau is going to ask for the name and telephone number of the person filling out the census. This is actually really important. They want to make sure that they can do follow-up questions if they need to. For example, if you put down that you are a purple unicorn under your race, they're going to want to follow up and ask you about that. But moreover, if you have additional people living with you, they might have some follow-up questions about that. And in the pandemic crisis that we're having in the country right now, it's important to make sure that they get this information so they don't have to send someone to your door and have someone knock on your door to ask you these questions. The census does not ask for some things too. It doesn't ask for social security numbers, bank or credit card information, citizenship status, anything political, donations, and household income. None of that stuff will be on the census. There used to be what's called the long form that asked some of these questions. The decennial census for 2020 is only the short form, so it's only the 10 questions on the previous slide that I went through. There's some key dates for the census. Everyone by now, we're recording this on March 30th, should have received at least their initial invitation to respond online in the mail from the Census Bureau. Most of you should have already received reminder letters and postcards as well. April 1st, Wednesday, April 1st is Census Day. So regardless of when you get your form and when you fill your form out, you always do so thinking about Census Day and who lived in your household, who will live in your household, who lived in your household on April 1st. This is a snapshot day, and this is the way that we make sure that we count everyone who lives in the United States only once and in the right place, because we have this snapshot of America on April 1st. They will send reminder letters with paper questionnaires in mid-April, and then they're going to send final postcards in the end of April before they do in-person follow-up. This timeline has changed a little bit because of COVID-19. Originally, non-response follow-up visits were supposed to start on May 4th, but they've pushed that back several weeks, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But the general trajectory is still there. Postcards will be sent. Reminder letters, mail forms will be sent, and you'll get all of these things in the mail, telling you how to respond to the census online or over the phone. So we've got the process down, right? Why is it important? The census does two major things. The first thing it does is give you a voice. The census is how you get a voice in Congress. They do something called apportion representation. They count everyone in the country. They divide that by 435, which is the number of representatives we have in Congress. And then they divide up those members of Congress based on the state's population. So depending on how many people live in your state, you should get an equal number of representatives. Most congressional districts have about 720,000 people. I think that the new number they're estimating will be about 810,000 people. So if you have, the more people you have, the more congressional representatives you have earned in Congress to represent you and your opinions and your views in that body. It's not just federal though. They also, the census data also is used for state House and state Senate representation. It also changes your school district. They use these counts to determine how one school might be overcrowded in the next 10 years if they don't redraw district lines. And so they move kids from school to school to make sure that there's an even number of kids and one school's not empty while another is overcrowded. Apportionment is really important. They also will redraw congressional and state legislative districts and voting precincts. I already talked about school districts. So that's to make sure that everybody has a representative and that everybody, each district has the same number of people. Redistricting is a huge process that'll happen in 2021 that's important because it impacts the strength of your voice in your state legislatures and in Congress. Census data is used for government planning decisions. Where do we put that new hospital? Where do we put a new school? And it also informs organizational decisions. Where does a nonprofit put their headquarters? Where does a homeless shelter put their services? Near where they found homeless populations, right? Where does the local ice cream shop expand and put in a new location? Probably where they've seen a lot of kids pop up over the past 10 years. And census data is also used to to enforce voting rights and civil rights legislation. This is why they ask Hispanic origin and race questions. A, because it's interesting demographic information for the country, but also to make sure that places where people who are often marginalized have the resources to make sure that they have voting rights and civil rights legislation enforced. Census data is also used to fund your community. One of the biggest things, the second biggest thing that the census does for you and your community is to allocate federal dollars to your community. The census numbers are used in federal formulas to allocate dollars. A lot of people think that politicians decide where money goes and when that money goes there, and that's not true for the most part. Most of those formulas include census data, and they are formulas that are set in law. So education funding, public schools, depends on how many kids you have in your area. Special and adult education, all tied in. Transportation and road funding, that all depends on how many people you have in your community. how well traveled those roads might be. All of that stuff goes into the formula that allocates federal dollars to your state, which comes down to your community to fix potholes in your roads. Anti-poverty programs like LIHEAP, Section 8 housing, WIC, SNAP, Head Start, child care, health center funding, all of that is also determined based on census numbers. Every person that is counted brings about $2,000 in federal funding to your community every year for the next 10 years. If your community misses 10 people who just didn't bother to fill out the census or weren't included, if you miss a child, you're missing out for those 10 people, $20,000 a year, but that's every year for 10 years. So you're missing out on $200,000 for your community that could have made a big difference. So it's important, and it's happening now. How can you participate? There are 4 ways to respond to the census. The best 2 ways by far are to go online to www.my2020census.gov or to call 1-800-923-8282 and fill out the census form online or over the phones. We put the English in here, but the phone lines actually have 13 different languages, live bodies who can help in language, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Spanish, several other languages are all available over the phones. At my2020census.gov, you can find language translations covering 59 different languages. It's not just in English. These are the best 2 ways to fill out the census form. You can also wait for the paper form to arrive in your mailbox. Most people will get that sometime around April 15th. Some people have already gotten the paper forms in their inbox, in their mailbox. They should fill it out and return it if they're more comfortable with that. But for the most part, people will get them sometime mid-April. The 4th way to respond is in person, and that's when folks don't fill out the form online, over the phones, or through the mail. Someone from the Census Bureau should be coming to knock on the door of that household to ask them the census questions in person. Because of COVID-19, we are changing things. The Census Bureau has already changed some things. We are trying to not have people come to the door. And so the best thing that we can do today is to have everybody self-respond. The census is a civic duty, but it's also legally required. Everyone by law must fill out the census, which is why folks come to the doors if you don't fill it out on your own. So filling it out online, filling it out over the phone is the best 2 ways to do this, and we really hope that everyone goes online or calls in today to get it done as soon as they possibly can, as quickly and accurately as they can. Who do you count on your form? Everyone who lives with you. Everyone who lives with you on April 1st. The one exception to that, because of COVID-19, would be college students. If you have a college student in your household and they live in the dorms, the university will count that child. If you have a college kid who lives off campus, they need to go online and fill out their own form using their school address. This is different. This has never been done this way before. Typically, if a college kid lives with you, even if they're going to a community college and they're living at home, you would count them, right? This is different because of COVID-19. So many universities have sent their students home. If you have a college-age student who is attending school, has an off-campus college address, they need to fill out their own census form. And any college kids who live in a dormitory will be counted by the university. Otherwise, we're going to have college communities all across the country underfunded for the next 10 years. So this is pretty important. If you have already filled out your form and you included your college student, that's okay. Just make sure that they go online and fill out their own form if they live off campus, and the Census Bureau will dedupe them on the back end. All children and babies should be counted. Children 0 to 4 is the largest group that was undercounted in 2010. We missed 2 million children. People often would count themselves, but not include their babies. Babies, day-old babies, babies born on April 1st, babies who are 2 or 3 months old, they count. Your kids count. So please make sure that any child that's living with you or in your household is counted, even if they're unrelated. If it's a foster child and they live with you, they get counted. If it is a grandchild that you're taking care of, but they live with you, you count them. If you're part of a divorced household, whoever has the children on April 1st should count them. But it is better for both parents to count them and have the Census Bureau dedupe them than for neither parent to count them. So talk to your former spouse or partner about who counts those kids, but make sure one of you does, or in the overabundance of caution, you can both do it and the Census Bureau will dedupe. All roommates, the guy who rents your basement needs to be counted in that census form. Don't forget that. Temporary house guests, if they have nowhere else to live. So that friend of yours who's couch surfing, who doesn't have their own place, they get counted. If you have a foreign relative visiting from Spain and they're going to be here for 6 months and they're here over April 1st, you count them because they are living with you. This is not about counting only U.S. citizens. This isn't about counting people who are normally in your house. This is a snapshot of America to see who is there on April 1st at that very moment. That's why we include everyone. So I'm asking you to go online and fill out a form. How do we know that that is safe? And how do we know that the Census Bureau, which is a government entity, won't do something to hurt us or our family members or loved ones if we fill out the census? There are several ways. The Census Bureau takes privacy very seriously. They made a lot of changes to make the census even safer and more secure back in the 1970s. There is no citizenship question on the census. So if people were nervous about the citizenship question possibly being used to deport themselves or their loved ones, that's not going to happen because there is no question. But it also won't happen because information collected by the Census Bureau can only be used for statistical purposes. The Census Bureau collects all the information, but they only push out information in aggregate, which means that your information is with everybody else's. There's no private identifiers. There's no way for anyone to look at the census data and say that, oh, this person filled out this information, and now I know who lives in their household, et cetera. It just doesn't work like that. There are three main protections in place. First of all census employees swear an oath on their first day of work. It's called Title 13, and they swear this oath that if they reveal private information about any one individual, they can be fined up to $250,000 and or jailed up to 5 years. The Census Bureau is barred from law from giving out that private information. And that includes sharing it with other agencies. They get information from Homeland Security and from the IRS. They get information from HUD and Health and Human Services, but they do not share what information they've gathered with any other entity. All of the forms that we fill out in 2020 are kept private for 72 years. So in 2022, the forms we filled out in 1950 will be released. It's cool for me because I'm going to get to see my grandfather's handwriting, writing down my mom and my aunt, and my uncle wasn't around yet, so he's not on the form. But that's going to be fun for me as a genealogy nerd. But I also think about where my parents were, my mom and my grandparents were in 1950. They had a landlord. So if, for example, they had extra family members living in that household in 1950, the landlord would probably be deceased in 2022. So that's a protection to make sure that nobody has information available during a time period where it could be detrimental. No landlord will know how you fill out the form in 2020. They might know if they're still around in 2092, but by then it won't matter. That's a really strong protection that's put in place. Let's talk quickly about COVID-19. I've mentioned a little bit already. There have been operational changes already to how the Census Bureau plans to do things. So they were supposed to knock on doors starting on May 4th. Right now that's been pushed back to May 28th. So they've been changing some of those things. They changed how they're planning to count homeless populations, and it's called transitory location enumeration. That's how they count people who live in motels and hotels, how they count people who live in RV parks or are migratory in that sense. They've pushed all of that stuff back at this point a month. So instead of doing things in April, they're going to be the end of April or early May, and some of the early May timelines have been pushed to the end of May. We're expecting a lot more of this to change because we don't know how the situation for COVID-19 in America is going to play out. This is one of the reasons why we are so strongly encouraging everyone to go online to my2020census.gov and fill out the form online, and to call or to call 1-800-923-8282 to fill the form out over the phone. The best thing that we can do is to make the Census Bureau's job easier by having everyone fill out the form as soon as they possibly can from the safety and privacy of their own home. I added this slide to the safety section because one of the things we want to prevent is having people go door knocking in an age where we have a nationwide pandemic. So having people fill out the form alone at home, safety of their home, prevents people from having to come and knock on doors. And I know the Census Bureau has talked about using social distancing practices, like standing 6 feet away and those sorts of things. But it's still a risk that we don't necessarily want to take, which is why we're encouraging people to do the census form over the phones or online and as soon as possible. Where can I learn more? You might have some questions. You can visit our website, which is the communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020. We are the National Community Action Partnership. You can also ask your own community action agency. Many staff members have been trained about the census, and they also know how to find information if you have questions. Here are some resources for you. It's again that communityactionpartnership.com/census-2020, where we have a lot of materials posted, flyers and handouts, blogs, and then our blog, which is communityactionpartnership.com/census-blog, has lots of stories and frequently asked questions answered. It's a good resource. We also are part of a coalition called the Census Counts 2020 Coalition, and all of our partners have toolkits. So lots of information is available at the censuscounts.org/resources page. If you have questions, we do encourage you to reach out to your Community Action Partnership staff. You can also shoot me an email. My name is Lindsay Marsh. My email address is lmarsh@communityactionpartnership.com. I hope that you've learned a little bit about the census today and why it's important. And I hope that you will go right now to my2020census.gov and fill out your form and do your part to help the Census Bureau do this critical process in an unprecedented age. Please do reach out to me if you have any questions, and I thank you for watching.